All right, welcome to another episode from the Chart Reader. So I covered a bunch on a live video I did a couple days ago. So I'm gonna do SOFI and KULR on this one. All right, and interesting day on SOFI. All right, I know we see a red candle. I know we see a almost minus 2% day, but this isn't a horrible candle right here. All right, and if you look in the box over there, I actually like the fact that we opened down here. You can see the second number. We open at 1136 and actually go all the way up to 1160. I know it's not a big percentage by any means, but I don't see a red day today. I actually see a day where we start down here, we close up here, and that's actually not a bad thing in my eyes, right? Obviously, I'm going to talk a lot about this 200 moving average, right? There was a scary little wick at some point that had us go under. Again, I already mentioned that we closed up here, right? So far the 200's doing the job. Let's see how it unfolds in the next coming days, all right? The one thing I'm going to mention, and it's kind of the last thing I said on the Discord, the 15-minute chart of SOFI really mirrored the indices. All right, I just put the Nasdaq chart. I mean, I guess I can just show it right here. Right, when you look at the S&P, it's not SWP, SPX. When you look at the S&P 500, you see that climb to the 20, go to the 50. Right, when you look at the Nasdaq, you see the climb to the 20, go to the 50, right? That's basically what we saw on SoFi. Climb to the 20, a little bit of a battle, go to the 50, right? So to me, I think what we're really looking for here is twofold. What are the indices going to do? And more importantly, for SoFi specifically, what's the 200 moving average going to do? All right. When we look at KULR, man, this is a disappointing one. All right. And believe me when I say I'm not here saying things are going to go down because I think they deserve to go down, because I think that that's what, this and that, like that's not my game, right? There was actually some decent news on this earnings. I know we just talked about it on the Discord. KULR. Right here. It was right here. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Right here. It looks like they beat earnings. They mentioned no debt, and they're starting to talk about AI and robotics, right? So it was an interesting earnings, and I think the day after really says it as well, right? We actually open all the way up here at $1.74 the day after earnings, right? So I think it's easy to say the market heard all of this as well and said, you know what, I'm gonna gap you up because I like that. But unfortunately, that's all we were able to really do, right? And lo and behold, we're at 131 today, right? Actually under the earnings candle. So I think this stress is a big thing I've been saying. Right now, stocks themselves really don't matter as much as the market, right? If the Nasdaq is struggling, if the S&P 500 is struggling, it's really hard for an individual stock to do well. And I hate to say this, but it's so true. Even good earnings will get overshadowed by a bad market. You know what I mean? It is what it is, and it's disappointing, right? Like there's so many like examples in my head. I've been saying this for a while, right? But again, I'm not here saying this is correct. I'm not here saying that this is, blah blah blah. Like, not I'm not arguing why it happens. I'm not trying to justify it or find reasoning to it. We're just here respecting what happens and trade accordingly, right? So one more time, do I think KULR deserves to be down here? Do I think it should be and all that stuff? None of that actually matters, right? But the other things, I'm about to talk about, we're at the big doji point, right? And I'm going to talk about that a bunch. Still some room from the 200, but man, it's one of those things where when the Nasdaq is under all five moving averages, number one, it's good to see that KULR isn't. That's actually a lot of strength in itself, right? Just to put a little positivity there. But yeah, when the Nasdaq's doing tough, it's hard for a technology sector stock to do anything but bad. You know what I mean? So one more time, I know no one wants to watch a video with some dude saying bad things about a stock you like, right? To me, I would much rather someone say the sky is on fire than pretend it's blue and sunny when that's just not the case. You know what I mean? So It's important to see how the market reacts, when it will calm down, and then that's when we attack, right? So cool. Before we do go any further, though, and I give you more of my thoughts and opinions, what are we going to do? Same thing we always do, right? We'll take a look at the daily and the weekly to see how these things are setting up short term. We have our 5 moving averages. There are horizontal support and resistance lines that I do draw manually myself. And then when we are done up here, we'll use the MACD, RSI, and volume as our lower indicators. Hey, really quickly, if you can, please subscribe to this channel. Share this video online with your friends. Comment good or bad if you disagree. Look, anything you can do helps so much with these YouTube algorithms. But for real, just being here, giving me your time, oh, I'm so grateful for it, all right? So let's get into SOFI. And look, SOFI, I think a couple things. And more than anything, SOFI has been almost a perfect mirror of the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, right? You can see they both peak right here at that middle February point, and they just kind of work their way down, make a little recovery, and work their way back down, right? SOFI, exact same thing. We peak right here in middle of February, we work our way down, we peak back up, and we come back down, right? It's the exact same thing across all three, right? The two indices in SOFI. So right off the bat, you gotta know that even if SoFi drops some really big good news, there's such a heavy mirroring of the indices that it just goes back to, if the ocean is crazy, if there are tsunamis on top of hurricanes, on top of lightning storms with these like 50-foot, 60-foot waves, even a strong vessel will struggle to go deeper and deeper in the ocean, right? And that's essentially what SoFi to the indices look like. Even if this thing was to drop some really big good news, and it's kind of what I just said on the KULR side on the opening thoughts, and we'll say after this, right? KULR just had some good earnings. KULR says that they beat earnings, they have no debt, and they're trying to get into some really cool sectors. I like both AI and robotic, right? Even with all that good in that little summary right there, KULR is still struggling and actually under the earnings candle, right? So overall, it's far less about these individual tickers and what's going on with the indices, right? We really need NASDAQ to, at the bare bone minimum, get over 17,800. Right? When we look at the S&P 500, it's basically the exact same lines, just different numbers, right? I need both of them to get at least over the 8 and the 20, and that's basically 5,700-ish right here, right? So they're both just, and look, when we look at the Dow Jones, it's not like the Dow Jones is doing fantastically either, right? It's definitely holding, and it has a better cluster here for sure, right? But man, this thing at least needs to get over all that, all the, like, that's what's missing here. Each of them are just not doing that fantastically, right? I don't know if you watched the live or not, but one thing I talked about is, look, right now my concern is less about the first green candle and more about the second and or third, right? I think it's easier to see on the, excuse me, on the S&P 500. One good green candle meant nothing. One good green candle meant nothing. One good green candle meant nothing. 1-2 brought a lot of profit. 1-2, with number 2 being a gap up, brought a lot of profit. Even with the little doji behind it, that was able to squeeze in another little something the following day, right? But we're looking for the next candle here, and tomorrow is setting up for a potential next candle day, right? So we're really hoping each of these does what it needs to do and get back over, and that's where we'll attack, right? I know I talked about it today on the Discord. Let's come back to for SoFi, 1270 will hit if NASDAQ and S&P 500 have a better tomorrow, right? We're looking for them to do their thing. That'll let us also bounce on this 200, and I'm putting us just a little bit higher than this, and I'm basically saying I think we can get around the 8 and the 20, the exact same 8 and the 20 I was asking for on the other indices, right? So 1270 from here, look, that's a little bit more than 10%, and more than anything, it opens up the next good channel that might take us to 14 something, right? So Tomorrow is what we're looking for. We need that second good green candle on the indices to hit. If it does, I think it brings at least a 10% day here, if not the potential for more, right? Otherwise, and I'm zooming out, I have no lines down, I'll draw some lines under. We cannot lose 1120. I think I would arguably say 1099 is it. And if you look, that's basically what we wicked. Yeah, that 1098 is the wick right there, right? But basically 50% of that is 1080. If you went just a little higher, that 1099 looks like basically the bottom of that candle. That's where I was clicking, right? But I think somewhere between 1099 and 1080, 1085, something like that, that's the death line. And if we lose that, I think you're talking about 10's not too bad. Maybe then at that point, I would say at least that then. I would maybe say 975. I think 975 would hit if we lose that 1080 that we talked about, right? That's a solid 10%, a little bit more than 10% down if that happens, right? So watch the indices, okay, number one, and then from there see what happens with that 200 moving average. Look, I'm really not talking about MACD and RSI much at this point. The index is too bad to care about some silly little indicators, right? When the market is good and there's a lot of good tickers out there, that's when we need the silly little details to really decide where we're going to put our money, right? Right now, all I care about are moving averages. The next thing I'll probably care about is volume, but really most of it is right here. And believe me, everything is day to day. I really don't care about the weekly too much. What I'm doing with the weekly is, hey, just make sure we're not below any crazy lines, right? I think I didn't care too much because hey, we're at least over the last of the moving averages on this one, right? We haven't lost them all necessarily here, right? But yeah, I would definitely get worried. And look, that 790, that 974 pretty much lines dollar to dollar to the 200, right? So I like that line even more. So, yeah, that's SoFi right there. Look, again, do I think it deserves to be down here? No. Do I remember not that long ago thinking that we were going to break 20 and go all the way and just boom, boom, boom and like potentially mirror what Palantir did? Hey, for sure I did, right? But when the market turns quickly, and it did, right? February down, I mean, that was that bad point, right? But yeah, when the market turns, there's not much that can happen, right? So let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions, even if you disagree. Let's come into KULR, all right? And I think before I get into the technicals and all that, I want to give like a baby disclaimer here. I know there are a lot of really passionate people about, with KULR, right? I know there are some people that are holding it long and strong and I'm not here to bash any stock, right? When I say a stock is going to go down, I'm not here saying it deserves to or anything like that, right? So my game is not to drop hate. I would much rather someone tell me things are bad than pretend everything is good. All right, so that's the just right there. Hey, if you can subscribe and share, it does really good things with the algorithms. All right, so KULR. Look, I mentioned in the opening thoughts. I'm gonna show it one more time. Where was it? I gotta click here and then come down a little bit. I apologize. Um, it looks like they beat earnings, have no debt, and are trying to get into some really good sectors. When the market was good and all those things come from an earnings call, oh my goodness, I'm expecting to break off five and fly, right? Like those are all really good things. I'm not here pretending they're not good things. Truth be told, I didn't really validate them, but I think the candle after kind of did for me, right? We close this day right here, Thursday the 27th, all the way down here at 146. Earnings happens, and then the next day we open all the way up here at 174. It was a monster gap up, arguably because of good earnings, right? We even wick over all of the cluster of moving averages, right? The problem was we ended up closing down here, basically penny to penny for where we opened the day before, right? So good earnings, all of this probably actually very true because you don't gap up on bad news, right? You gap up on good news. The problem was the market was so rough we couldn't close it, right? And again, I think I use a lot of different analogies for this, right? One that I thought of today. Look, a great white shark is arguably the scariest thing in the ocean. It could probably kill just about anything in there, right? If you put a great white shark on land, some ants are eventually going to kill it and eat it all, right? The shark's not going to be able to breathe soon enough, and then it's game over, right? The strategy that a great white shark has in the ocean just doesn't work when it's not in the ocean, right? And that's what's happening right now. Believe me, right? Let's look at NASDAQ. When NASDAQ was doing nothing but going up, 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 right? It was just easy. And obviously there's some downs, right? But like let's just quickly zoom in on this view. From August all the way to basic, let's just say January, right? Look what happens to KULR. It's not quite as quickly as it should have, right? There were a lot of stocks that took a while. Hey, even the quant stocks kind of didn't start until September and October, right? But eventually the good market helps all, and it took till November, but hey, from November till that basically January where I said let's stop it right there, that's where this was able to do good things, right? I don't know if this earnings was that spectacular or not, right? But whatever it was, when the market was good, it allowed good things to happen, right? Once NASDAQ started to change, and obviously it goes real flat right here and then really hard down there, it just becomes tough. Because again, real flat on NASDAQ can be bad for something like KULR as well. And then clearly it's going to magnify around that same 18th window, just like we saw with everything, right? So this has far less to do with KULR itself and more what's going on with the market, right? On the KULR technicals itself, look, I think it's a very big strength that we're up here where we have a good distance from the 200 moving average when we're seeing it a time and again, right? Like NASDAQ has been under that 200 for actually 1, 2, 3, 4, going into the fifth week now, right? So there's strength comparatively there. But the problem is, man, unless NASDAQ can do good things, my worry is we're going to come to a dollar, right? I think the immediate target for up is 150. If 150 breaks, I think there's a chance we go to 170. I think it's going to be really hard to break 170. All right. Again, NASDAQ had a decent day today. It's not as pretty as other ones, but decent can't like we're looking for a good it's a little bit easier to see on the S&P 500, but that's not a bad red candle right there. If we can get the second green candle, that should do well, right? We see one good one and then a bad one, good one and a bad one, good one and a bad, good and a good, good and a good. We want a good and a good, and that's where maybe that 170 will hit, hopefully that 150 at the bare minimum. Even 150 on this thing is at least 15% if I'm doing some quick math in my head right there, right? So um, I'm not looking at the weekly much. All right. The one important thing to see on the weekly is this 130 is basically the 200 as well. If we lose that, this comes down to 97. We just said if we lose this 130, we might come down to a dollar, right? So I think that's echoed on both the daily and the weekly. I am ignoring the MACD and the RSI. Man, I wish volume was just a little better, but really it matters more about the moving averages at this point. All right. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions, even if you disagree. Oh, I appreciate you so, so much.